Thank you so much for having us. So our paper is co-authored with Graeme, Auld, and Cashore, and it's called Private Regulation, Public Policy, and the Perils Adverb Piece, an overview which provides a critical review of the past 2 decades of work on private regulatory governance systems. And what we mean by that are systems such as sustainability certifications, where rules are set by non-governmental actors such as NGOs or companies. Those rules are monitored or enforced by the same actors, and compliance leads to preferential treatment, for instance, through improved reputation, market access, or pricing. And so as such, private regulatory systems have mushroomed over the past years, so has the academic literature on it in a very wide range of disciplines. And this includes political science, public policy, management studies, business ethics, industrial relations, law, geography, sociology, development studies, the list can go on. But since such work was mainly phenomenon-based, scholars brought their own ontological assumptions about the nature of the social and political world, and especially about the nature of causal relationships within that world, into their treatment of private regulation, as well as the treatment of the problem-solving potential of such private governance systems, as well as their relationship to public policy. And so in consequence, the literature is very rich, but also contradictory in its conclusions. And our paper aims to bring some order into this complexity, explain the divergent conclusions and policy recommendations that different approaches make, and also make scholars more aware about their own ontological assumptions, as well as those of others. And so if we can go to the figure that is 2 slides over, we do this by identifying and describing 5 broad ontological approaches that are organized along 2 axes. And the first, agency structure axis, makes a difference between assumptions that put greater importance on individual action versus those that emphasize the importance of political or economic structures. And then the other, synchronic diachronic axis, distinguishes ontologies that focus on changing specific outcomes with relatively little attention to their historical circumstances from those that take a wide-ranging historical perspective and seek to understand critical junctures in time that may lead to problem solving. And so as the figure shows, we thus find treatments of private regulation that are very focused on the strategic behavior of agents and don't really place specific emphasis on their historical circumstances, like the calculated strategic behavior approach in bubble 1. But we also have approaches such as the neo-Gramscian perspectives in bubble 5 that see private regulatory systems as just one element embedded in a much broader capitalist struggle. And inevitably, such different approaches then have different policy recommendations on what needs to be done for private regulation to reach its goals. And in the paper, we argue that it's important for researchers to be more transparent about their own ontological underpinnings for 2 reasons. On the one hand, these pre-existing conceptual models may subconsciously lead to the selection of evidence that fits the model at hand. And on the other hand, policymakers should be exposed to a wide array of viewpoints, and unless it is made clear that each analysis uses a specific way of seeing the world and therefore also illuminates and obfuscates different elements accordingly, there's a high chance that we will find adverse ontological selection, whereby certain approaches and insights are systematically ignored and certain problem conceptions are prioritized over others. And so by both identifying and describing this work on private regulation in a very broad range of disciplines and spelling out the different underlying assumptions, we hope to build bridges between the different conversations that are happening and help scholars to speak to each other rather than past each other. And although we were not aiming for an exhaustive review of all the private governance literature in existence, and there's certainly more perspectives that could be added to this, the paper might still be a very good starting point for scholars entering the field to get an overview of what discussions are taking place. And finally, if scholars take up our recommendations, then we hope that policymakers may receive more multifaceted advice and might make decisions that help private governance systems to reach better outcomes. And I'll leave it at that as well. Thanks so much for having us.